I always hated airports. To me, they were just a necessary evil I had to put up with for work. Even though they messed up my marriage, I still couldn't stand them. They were always packed with people waiting to be crammed into a plane like cattle. And honestly, that's exactly how we were treated. Maybe I should have just accepted it as part of the job, especially since I got paid well enough to deal with it. 10 years ago, I'd stand in line to check in, then go through security, and finally wait again to board the plane, where I'd have to inch forward while folks ahead of me stuffed their bags in the overhead bins. My seat was always in the back, so it took forever to get there. But now, as someone who traveled a lot, I didn't have to talk to anyone unless I wanted to. I didn't even need to check my luggage anymore. TSA pre-check cut down my security wait time at most airports. My monthly coast-to-coast trips, plus another shorter trip each month, had earned me some status with the airlines I liked, so I didn't have to sit in the back anymore and could board right after first class. My credit card even got me into the lounge, which was a nice perk at Miami Airport. Even though things had gotten better, I still didn't like it. But today, while I was in the lounge, a woman named Natalie struck up a conversation with me. She was attractive, probably around my age, wearing a ruffled dress with a deep neckline that was modestly covered by a cardigan. As we chatted about her latest travels, she let her cardigan slip just a little, and I found myself drawn in. I shared my own stories, from work to some wartime experiences, and by the end of our talk, she handed me her business card. I glanced at it briefly, reluctant to take my eyes off her, and noticed she was from Denver too, which led to a bit more conversation. She mentioned she had one more stop before heading home, which was probably a good thing. After a pleasant chat, we headed to our separate gates. Was she flirting with me? Maybe. I kind of regretted not realizing it at the moment. After so many years of marriage, my flirting radar had gone numb. Damn. Not that anything should have or would have happened. I'd been faithful for 26 years and didn't plan on changing that. This was just another cross-country trip, and despite my dislike of airports, I was in a good mood after talking with Natalie, and because my trip had gone well, which meant a nice bonus next quarter. I had just settled into my slightly more comfortable Economy Plus seat to head home when my phone rang. I was about to switch it to airplane mode when I noticed it was my wife, Sarah. Strange. It was pretty early in Denver for her to be up, let alone calling. I wondered if something was wrong. My finger hovered over the answer button, but instead, I turned it off. If it had been one of my kids, I would have answered, but whatever Sarah needed could wait. I knew that the travel, which started about 10 years ago, had been tough on us, even though it wasn't all that frequent. I was usually gone for maybe 6 nights a month, which shouldn't have been such a big deal, but it sure felt like it was. I wished Sarah could have been a little more understanding. When I first told her about the new job all those years ago, along with the bump in salary and bonuses, she practically shoved me out the door and then greeted me with open arms and legs when I got back. But now, despite trying to take her out more and spend quality time together, she seemed to be pulling away. Recently, my boss offered me a new role that would mean even more travel and a bigger paycheck. But I didn't even bother mentioning it to Sarah. It just didn't seem worth it. The whole situation was wearing me down, but at least I could take comfort in my kids, who were truly amazing. I really loved my kids. My daughter, Emily, had just started pharmacy school this fall, and my son, Jake, was taking summer courses to get ahead in his first year of engineering, following in my footsteps. We were both incredibly proud of them, but we missed being around for their milestones and just having them at home. I figured Sarah felt the same since she'd seemed pretty down lately. Despite everything going on between us, we had raised 2 incredible kids, smart, happy, hardworking, generous, and funny. Over the years, they had brought us countless moments of joy. I found myself wanting to visit them more often now that they each had their own places nearby. I even thought about downsizing from our big house, but Sarah wasn't interested. With her job as a financial manager at the hospital and her involvement on various charity boards, the house, neighborhood, and our neighbors suited her image perfectly. The extra work to maintain the house and garden was a small price to pay for her social standing. The flight was as dull as ever, or maybe I was just too wiped out from the long trip. I wasn't in the mood for a movie, and since I hadn't slept much, I decided to close my eyes for a bit. I woke up to the plane touching down, surprised that I'd slept through almost the entire flight. When I turned my phone back on, it felt like the world had gone crazy. Voicemails and messages were pouring in from everyone who mattered. I called my daughter. "Oh my God, Dad, thank goodness you called." "Emily, you knew I was flying. What's going on? Why is everyone trying to reach me without telling me what's wrong?" "Well, I don't want to get into it over the phone. Just swing by my place on your way home. Jake will be there too." "Emily, you can't leave me in the dark like this. Are you and your brother okay? Is your mom all right? Did something happen to someone?" "I'm sorry, Dad. It's just a huge mess. No one's hurt. Well, not anyone we care about. I'll explain everything when you get here." What the hell? I drove from Denver International Airport to Emily's place near the university faster than I thought possible. When I got there, I found her almost in tears, and Jake sitting quietly in a chair, looking serious. "What happened, sweetheart?" "Oh, Dad, we're so sorry. It's a big mess," Jake chimed in. "It's like a bad dream." "Just tell me what's going on," I urged. Emily continued. "We never wanted any of this to happen. It's just spiraled out of control, like a snowball." "What exactly was it that you didn't want to happen?" "Well, we wanted something to happen, just not like this." "Sweetheart, you still haven't told me what's going on. Just spit it out." All right. It all started about a month ago when you were on your last trip to Boston. I was planning to drop by and visit Mom during lunch, and as I was pulling up, I noticed a Tesla driving into our garage. That struck me as odd. I didn't recognize the car, and I had no idea who it could belong to. From the street, I could see that the lights were on inside the house, and from the way the shadows were moving, it was clear someone was heading toward the garage. I called Mom on her cell, but she didn't pick up. I waited a few more minutes and tried her again. When she finally answered, I asked if she was home, and she told me she was still at work and would call me back later. Obviously, I knew she was lying, so I hung up and kept watching the house, trying to figure out what to do. After a while, I moved my car out of sight and sneaked over to peek into the garage window. Mom's car was there, and so was the Tesla. I was furious. I got back in my car, called Jake, and told him what I'd seen. Enraged, I spent the first few hours waiting for the guy to leave, and then Jake came and kept an eye on things until he finally left at 7:02 a.m. the next day. Jake followed him to work at some big office building in Cherry Creek. A little later, he approached the security guard and asked if he recognized the guy who had just gone in. The guard gave Jake his name, and Jake called me with the info. We didn't know what to do next. I called Mom the next morning, upset that she hadn't answered my call, and since then, I've been keeping my distance from her. During your most recent trip, we watched the house again, and the same thing happened. So Jake and I decided we needed to do something about it. Jake chimed in. "I was there when you were checking the smoke detectors a few weeks back, and when I saw the detector in the garage, an idea popped into my head. It seemed kind of funny at the time, but not anymore. We didn't tell you because we knew you'd want to catch them in the act, and we were afraid you might hurt the guy, or even Mom in the process, either by accident or on purpose, and end up in jail. We didn't want that. We just wanted to shake them up and embarrass them. I suggested to Jamie that we sneak into the garage around midnight and create one of those random sparks that sometimes happen with electric cars, hoping it would make enough smoke to set off the alarm. Since the smoke detectors were working, I figured nothing would really happen except the fire department showing up. So I guess you didn't realize there was a heat detector in the garage, not a smoke detector," I said. Jake looked stunned. "Oh, crap, that's why the alarm didn't go off right away." Jamie jumped in. He thought calling the fire department would be embarrassing, but that wasn't enough, so I kinda got involved too. I was starting to piece together the consequences of what my kids had done. I asked, "So, it looks like my marriage just went up in flames. Is the house still standing?" Jamie answered, "What? Oh yeah, well, mostly. Oh God." I stopped by the house after Mom left for work both times, and each time I found one of Mom's Magnum wine bottles in the trash. I know she likes to keep her wine chilled, so it seemed like the perfect opportunity to make things even more humiliating. These days, it's pretty easy to buy Viagra or something similar online, so I ordered some. As a pharmacy student with a background in chemistry, it wasn't hard to dissolve the pills into a liquid. Tyler cut in. You didn't really do that, did you? I'm afraid I did. Yesterday afternoon I snuck into the house, checked the wine fridge and saw that Mom had already opened her Magnum bottle, then sealed it back up and put it away. Only a glass or two had been poured, so I added my mixture, gave it a stir, and put it back without leaving a trace. We figured they'd have to leave in a hurry when the fire department showed up, and he wouldn't be able to hide his reaction, which would blow their cover right in front of all the neighbors. Mike took over. Just before midnight, I slipped in through the garage window I had unlocked earlier. It took some work, but by using the car's charging port and a few tools, I managed to create an arc that heated the metal around it. I'm not sure if his car had a flaw or something, but suddenly there was this burst of sparks. I thought it would trigger the smoke alarm, at least that's what I hoped. So I got out of there fast. Apparently, after I left, the battery caught fire. I think that's what happened, because by the time the firefighters arrived, not only was his car burning, but Mom's car was up in flames too. The alarm was blaring through the whole house, and the entire neighborhood could hear it. Jamie added, "You know how Mom gets when she's panicked. It's like her brain just shuts down." That's when things really start to get interesting. More interesting than finding out my wife's cheating and our house nearly burned down, Jamie continued. We did mention that the house didn't actually burn down. Oh, fantastic. Anyway, when I talked to Mom this morning, she told me that she jumped out of bed as soon as the alarm went off. She tried to wake up her friend, Eric, but he was out cold. She knew he'd had a lot to drink and couldn't get him to wake up. Thinking he might be dead, she freaked out. She called 911 from the house phone and started yelling, "Fire! Get an ambulance!" Then she grabbed him by the ankles and started dragging him out of the bedroom, completely forgetting they were both stark naked. He was too heavy for her to carry down the stairs, so she just kept dragging him along, with him face down. Remember that nail at the entrance to your bedroom that snagged my sock a few months ago? Well, either you didn't hammer it down, or it popped back up because, guess what? As Mom was dragging Eric, who's a pretty big guy, the nail caught on him. And this is where the Viagra he drank with the wine comes into play. Not only did the carpet nail tear into his groin, but because he was, at attention, it also sliced him there, and all along his stomach and face. Since the house was pretty dark and he was unconscious, Mom didn't notice and kept dragging him down the stairs, thump, 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 all the way down. I almost feel bad for the guy. Along with the 3-foot gash bleeding from his groin, he got carpet burns from his groin to his nose, which probably split open when he tumbled off the bottom step and hit the tile floor in the kitchen. Bam! And being dragged across the tiles to the front door couldn't have been fun either, especially when his head bounced over the threshold, smacked the concrete porch, and rolled down the steps to the sidewalk. Thump, thump, bam. It sounds like he ended up with road rash and a pretty serious facial injury. Tyler didn't feel too guilty about it. Mike continued the story. The house alarm must have woken up the neighbors because there were quite a few of them watching as Mom dragged her lover, both completely naked, out the front door for everyone to see. Timothy from across the street even filmed the whole thing on his phone and sent it to me. Here, take a look. Tyler was stunned by what he saw on Mike's phone. A video of Sarah, naked, backing out of the front of the house. And sure enough, Eric's head was bouncing off the concrete steps as she dragged him behind her. Either her adrenaline was through the roof, or she was stronger than he ever imagined. Just after that, the ambulance and fire department arrived. He watched as the crews rushed into the house, opened the garage door, and started soaking everything in and around the garage with water. The paramedics went to Sarah with an emergency blanket to cover her up, then turned Eric over. His bleeding, erect organ was still on full display. Tyler couldn't help but think he'd come out of this mess better than Eric had. Mike told him that apparently Eric's electric car had some device that sent an alert to his home phone whenever something unusual happened with the vehicle. Eric's wife, Francine, got the alert and, realizing her husband's car was at someone's house instead of the airport where it should have been, rushed over to check it out. Continuing to watch the video, Tyler saw that they couldn't wake Eric up. He was alive but completely out of it. They brought a stretcher from the ambulance, but before they could strap him in, Francine showed up and flipped it over, causing Eric to fall face first onto the sidewalk. He was going to need a lot more than a few stitches for the fresh gash on his head. Should he feel sorry for the guy? Tyler couldn't remember ever seeing someone so angry. Francine landed a few solid kicks to Eric's groin before they managed to pull her away. She was still kicking as they loaded him back onto the stretcher, his bleeding organ now looking twisted and crooked, which hadn't been the case a few minutes earlier. Tyler wondered if Eric had woken up when they tried to straighten it out. He kind of hoped so. Sarah stood there in shock as at least a dozen or so very entertained neighbors watched this tragic comedy unfold. Francine charged at Sarah, but instead of hitting her, she yanked the blanket off, leaving Sarah naked again on the front lawn. Tyler thought to himself, "Damn, I'm going to miss those breasts." Though the neighbors certainly didn't miss the sight of them or her neatly groomed bikini area. Her grooming habits were no longer a private matter, that was for sure. Unfortunately, by the time the police arrived, the fire was mostly under control, except for Eric's car, which was still sparking and smoking. Francine, practically foaming at the mouth, demanded that the police arrest Sarah. On what charge, no one was quite sure, but an officer led Sarah, visibly shaken, to the back seat of a patrol car, just to keep her away from Francine and the growing crowd. Jamie explained, "We knew Eric was married to Francine, but we had no idea she was the district attorney's daughter. I guess she had enough pull to get Mom taken to the station and thrown into an interrogation room for the rest of the night, wearing nothing but that blanket. They let her go around 6 a.m. When she tried to call you, you didn't pick up." Tyler thought about how, since Eric hadn't woken up right away, they ran a toxicology report on him, which revealed unusually high levels of Viagra in his system. When his wife found out, she was furious because Eric had a heart condition and supposedly would never take something like that. At least, that's what she claimed. The medic mentioned that it was actually a good thing the fire happened, because it meant Eric was rushed to the hospital in time to prevent him from slipping into a coma, which could have been much worse. Tyler asked, "Even worse than this?" Mike jumped in. "The police took Mom back to the interrogation room, and this morning officers came to the house to try and gather evidence. But the firefighters knocked over the wine bottle and glasses during the firefight, breaking them. With all the water and the broken glass, any remaining wine was ruined, so there's no uncontaminated evidence left. I was there earlier, and the only thing the police noted was a bloody trail leading down the steps and out the door. I bet they're grilling Mom in the interrogation room right now. Everyone assumes Eric took the Viagra, even though he wasn't supposed to. And without any solid evidence, I'd be surprised if they keep Mom much longer. They managed to drag the Tesla out of the garage that morning. Mom and Francine were all over the news. It wasn't a pretty sight," Tyler remarked. "Where's your mother now?" Jamie answered, "She's still at the police station. They said they'd call us when we can pick her up." "I'm really sorry, Dad. We should have just told you instead of trying to get back at her. We were so angry, and we only made a bad situation worse." While his kids looked worried, a smile slowly spread across Tyler's face. He stood up and said, "I appreciate what you both tried to do, really. It means a lot to me. Honestly, I don't think you made things worse. Considering everything, it turned out pretty well. I'm heading home now. Your mother's going to need you both. You can decide who's going to pick her up. It won't be me." They nodded, understanding. On the way home, Tyler stopped by the bank and transferred half of their accounts into a new one under just his name. He planned to deal with the rest of the finances later that evening or the next day. He also stopped at the local market and picked up some garbage bags to take his clothes to the dry cleaners, figuring everything in the house probably reeked of smoke. As he approached the house, he didn't pay much attention to the fire damage. Instead, he noticed the bloody trail across the porch and down the steps, clearly visible. He chuckled as he opened the front door, which was closed but not locked. The bloody trail continued up the steps. Ignoring the blood, he went to the bedroom and packed all his clothes into bags to take to the dry cleaner. His insurance would cover the bill. The sight of the unmade bed momentarily saddened him, but the feeling passed quickly. He knew what he needed to do next. Divorcing that woman was the obvious first step. He planned to separate their finances, find an apartment, travel more, and use his newfound freedom to spend more time with the kids and enjoy life to the fullest. He even considered asking Mike to send the video to the local news stations. It would surely boost the visibility of Rebecca's volunteer organizations, much to their delight. As he loaded the last bag into his car, a police cruiser pulled up. The officers asked him for some ID and inquired about the day's events. Possibly having been there earlier or having seen the video, one of the officers looked a bit embarrassed but still asked, "Are you going to be okay?" All the day's events replayed in Tyler's mind like an old-fashioned game show wheel. When the mental wheel stopped at Natalie's business card, a broad smile spread across Tyler's face. "I'm going to be just fine, officer. Believe me, I'm going to be just fine."